the I Make a Difference podcast, an adventure of exploration of your human self, the conditioned and unhealed parts of you, and your true self, the natural, real and powerful you. A pathway where you unravel, heal and uncover on your journey back to you. How would you feel if you had not just one, not just 2 or 3, but close to 13 or 14 items that you own that had something go wrong with them that required them to be repaired? Or where something started dying that needed assistance and help to bring it back to life. And specifically, I'm talking about plants. This is something that I've experienced in recent times. And if it was me about 5 or 6 years ago, I would have been vulnerable. I would have been angry. And I would have felt vulnerable because I would have felt like the universe was punishing me and that I was being treated unfairly and unkindly. When none of that happened. As I've healed, as I've unraveled, as I've grown and evolved and become far more connected to who I truly am, my soul self, my levels of trust of myself and what happens in life has increased hugely. And add to that, beautiful Alan, my partner, is someone who's very pragmatic, who's a glass half full man, who knows that, and when I say knows, he feels it very deeply within him that everything will be fine and it'll work out. And when you look at life, it always does. So through his influence and being a beautiful example for me and his reassurance, because yes, I have been needy of reassurance many times over a number of years when I've been faced with situations like this and worse. And he's been a shining light in that area. And the recent experiences I've had have supported me to see how much I've grown, how much now I know that when things happen to us and that we experience that are either beyond our control or that we've contributed to, that can be very emotionally tumultuous type of situations, that they're actually happening because there's an adventure about to unfold and you have an opportunity to experience reinforcing your self-worth, being open to what you truly deserve and support, help and assistance, which then can strengthen your self-worth. If only I'd known this years ago. I'm your host, Melinda Cates, and this is one of my emergent processing episodes. And if you're not familiar with what emergent processing is, it's where I share some processing that has surfaced in me, where my awareness is being taken to a particular area of my growth and involvement to help me reinforce what I am doing and know and be aware of what I am experiencing so that I can own it, or where there are learnings or where there are discoveries. And specifically with this episode, there's 2 key elements to my processing that I've been doing lately. And one of them is the distinctions I'm getting around how I am approaching and working with situations that used to cause me so much emotional upheaval in the past, and that I'm now far more trusting at a deeper level where it's actually really natural and I'm quite pragmatic and so open to, if this is happening, what's going to unfold, who am I going to meet and what's going to happen? And what's the beauty and the magic that's going to come out of it? Which then leads me to the second part, which is about soul agreements. Because when things happen that are quite tumultuous, there are people that step into our life that help us. There are people that are there to support us. And the more aware you are of it, the more you actually get to see how kind, how generous, how helpful, how considerate, how obliging, and how in integrity those people are. And I've even had recent experiences where the interaction was one where we both acknowledged we'd made a soul agreement to be there for each other at that particular time. So the more aware you are of your soul agreements, the more powerful it is in valuing and acknowledging the other person who's able to connect to their soul and remember, and the valuing and acknowledgement of yourself and you connecting to your soul and you remembering what you agreed to. So we're going to have an explore of what I've processed and what I've been through, and what are the different types of reasons for our soul agreements and the value of being aware of those. And through the process, it's about being able to have a greater awareness of how you can trust all processes, and that putting so much emotional worry and energy into it actually compounds the emotions you already have within you, impacts your physical body significantly, and creates huge levels of stress. So how did this come about? My mother was expecting some natural products to help her with some of the physical things that she experiences. And the lady who was providing them forgot them. And through my mother's processing, I got to see that there was a level of concern she held around her not receiving those products. And a couple of days later, she was actually quite physically impacted in her energy levels. So in watching her process and her pattern of how she manages things, her and I talked through the fact that did she have expectations around receiving the product and that it was going to help her out, and so was she emotionally attached to it, and in not receiving it, did she feel a level of being let down? And through the processing that we did, yes, she recognised that. So the emotional impacts of not receiving what she was after had an impact on her energy and her physical state. I jumped in and said to my mother, I'm happy to help you. Why don't we drive to the person's place and get it? Because then you can actually receive what you need and apply it to help your physical body. So Mum and I set off on a Sunday to this lady's place, which was in quite a remote area. So after a car trip, a ferry trip, another car trip, and up lots of windy roads, we finally got to the lady, and Mum, you could feel her energy change, and that she had a level of relief that she now actually had the product. And what we decided was to come the long way back home instead of the way we had taken to get to this woman's place, because Mum's car needed some petrol. Now, the petrol station near us charges about 30 or 40 cents more than the ones in other towns nearby. And look, we were close to the other town nearby, and so it was convenient. Mum and I started heading back to go and get petrol at this other town. And I decided to ring Alan to let him know that we were going to be a bit longer, and this is the reasoning why. Now, what Alan shared with me was quite surprising. And it's surprising because of how it came about. Alan shared that that local petrol station that we were relying on had run out of petrol, and that they wouldn't be receiving any petrol for another 3 hours. That was fantastic to know, because if we'd gone there, then we may not have had enough petrol to get to another petrol station to get home. And also we may have had to have sat round for 3 hours. The most interesting part was, how on earth did Alan get this information? Because there was no reason for Alan to go and look at this particular petrol station state and where they're at. What had happened is somehow it had surfaced up on his phone through Facebook. Now, he's not even following that petrol station. It's got nothing to do with him. But through the beautiful process of how things unfold and the soul agreements that we make, and who would have thought a petrol station we make a soul agreement with? Anyway, Maybe I'm stretching that one a little bit far. But the beautiful thing was that Alan found that information out. So it meant another detour for us. And it was a detour of another half an hour to go to the next town to get petrol. And amongst all of this, over the previous few days, our avocado tree, which for the first time ever is bearing fruit, has lost all its leaves. And we were really concerned about it. So we've explored what we needed to do, and we needed to get gypsum. And there's a reason I'm sharing this, and I'm coming to it in a moment. Alan said to me, while you go to that other town, can you pop into their local hardware store and get some gypsum, because they're the only people that have it. There was a reason why that other petrol station didn't have any petrol. It was because we were meant to go to this other town to get gypsum, because that was the only hardware that had it. And obviously the avocado tree needed it sooner than later. Mum turned to me and said, "You're being quite different." Because at this point she's like, "I'm so sorry this has happened. If I'd had petrol in the car." And I was like, "Mum, it's cool. It just is what it is. And hey, let's look at what are the benefits of us having to go to the other town." Well, her favourite bakery is there and my favourite coffee is there, so we viewed it as that, and we also saw it as, great, we can get the gypsum for the avocado tree. So the key message in this is, when things change, take a moment and stay open to there's a reason why you're being redirected, and look at what are the benefits that you can immediately see that'll come out of it. So Mum and I proceeded. We got petrol, which was at a far lesser rate than even the other town, let alone the petrol station down the road from us. So we got cheaper petrol, but had to travel further, so it probably made up the difference. Got coffee, she got her bakery food, and I went to the local hardware store. Now this is where the interesting part happens. I walked into the garden area and walked around looking for gypsum. Now, for some reason, I had it stuck in my head that it was the metal, which is just ridiculous. Anyway, that was where my head was at. There was no employee available to help me to find it, which is most unusual for this hardware store. So I went up to the counter, and the young lady that was there, because she was a younger lady than me, was quite sort of short with me, and said something, but I couldn't hear a word she was saying. In the meantime, this guy had come up. He would have been in what I will get about his latter 30s. And I said to the lady, "Sorry, I can't hear what you're saying." And he turned to me and he said, "Can I help you?" Where he'd come from was one of the hardware areas in the store. And I explained to him that I was looking for some gypsum. So he took me immediately to the spot. And I went, "Oh my gosh, we've already got this at home." So I'm not sure where Alan's and my head were that we actually believed we needed more when we already had a bag of it. So the reason I went to this particular town wasn't to get gypsum, but the reason became evident. I said thank you and I was about to walk off. And the guy said to me, "What do you need the gypsum for?" And I explained to him about our avocado tree. And he said, "Wow," he said, "you've got root rot. And the best way to deal with this is to do this, this, and this, and this. I've got avocado trees at home and I've had a similar process and thing happen with my avocado trees. This is what I did and this is what worked." And he explained things that we could do for the avocado tree that I hadn't read or found on Google anywhere. He also advised us to go and get fertilizer for the avocado tree and guided us as to where we needed to go to get it. As we were parting and walking away, he said, "When I came up to the counter, I knew I was meant to help you." And I said, "Well, if you hadn't, I wouldn't have found out all the amazing information that you've just shared with me that potentially is going to help me now actually save our avocado tree." And he said, "We were meant to meet." And I said to him, "Yes." And this was unusual for me because I never say this to people I don't know. I may discuss it with people who are familiar around this area. I turned to him and said, you and I made an agreement when we were souls to come into this lifetime and to be here now and to help each other. And he said, I totally believe in that and I totally agree with it. And I must say, one of the very few times in my life, I actually was taken back and took a bit of a breath. He smiled and walked back to his department, which was not the gardening one. And in that moment, I just knew I was meant to say what I said to him. And what was so powerful was that him and I had consciously acknowledged our soul agreement. And in that moment, we had consciously completed what we were meant to do in this lifetime with each other for the benefit of the avocado tree. So knowing that all of the changes in the process of Mum receiving her natural product for her health and our extended journey, that I got to be even more conscious of each person I come across and meet, and how the agreements we've made when we're in soul form are what we deserve. And even if it's painful experiences, it's what we've chosen to receive and experience because we deserved it for our growth and evolvement. And that gentleman, whose name I don't even know, gave me the gift of taking another level of consciousness and awareness around all the agreements I have that I made in soul form to meet, interact, hear, receive from in this lifetime. And the more conscious we are of it, the more powerful we can, how do I describe it? It's the more powerful we are and consciously interacting with other individuals. And the faster we grow and evolve, the more accepting we are of the experiences we have, and the more we gain from them and see the benefit of them. I am very appreciative that that man and I made that agreement to come together to have information around our avocado tree, which, by the way, is now starting to sprout leaves again and looking far more healthy, and the avocados are growing. And not only that, part of that soul agreement between the two of us was for me to verbalize it to a complete stranger and for me to go to a different level of awareness around soul agreements. Because soul agreements are where you and another soul made an agreement to come together in this lifetime for a purpose. And it's not just in human form, it can be the beings in our lives, the animals in our lives have made soul agreements with us. And even the land, that we've made a soul agreement to come to a particular land, to be connected to that land. And for me, that is most evident when I worked with the Aboriginals and their connection to country. And with the Maoris, when they return back to their iwi, their hapu's land, and their connection to the land. But I've also experienced it and been called to a place like many of us are. Because that land, that space, that environment provides you with what you need for your growth and evolvement. And it's the same with our animals, and it's the same with every being that we come across in this lifetime. There are a number of different focuses and purposes for our soul agreements and us coming together. And you don't actually have to physically even come together. It can be that a person has put a message over the radio, or an actor has said something in a movie or the TV, or there's a post put up on Facebook, or you read something in the paper. That person has still agreed to say those particular things and be involved in that for the message to come through, for you to hear it, to read it, to see it, to feel it, for your growth and evolvement. You can pass a person in a street, the exchange of a smile, the exchange of a frown, which can trigger and prompt processing in you. And the more aware you are of all of those elements and those types of interactions, the more you will be accepting and receiving of what you are meant to gain from that exchange. So what are some of the key focuses of our soul agreements? People will come into our lives to create conditioning, to support us to separate from our soul and to become more our human self, because that's part of the experience and the journey we're meant to go through. So they will teach us to learn about human expectations, control, judgments, behaviours, thinking, and processing that's not natural to us. My father gifted me so much in that area, and I am very valuing and appreciative of what he offered me the opportunity to discover and experience. Because I learned all about being human. And by learning about being human, gave me the reference point of wanting to reconnect, to appreciate, value, and know what a soul and my true self is like. People will come into our life to teach us how to live in the human, unnatural world. So unnatural in that being human is not our natural state. And so that we have a reference point for knowing what is natural. People come into our life for us to experience human emotional processing, so that we are hurt, so that we do experience rejection, so that we experience guilt and abandonment and loneliness. Because through experiencing those things, then we get to be aware of and understand and appreciate what it's like to be accepted, to be loved, to experience kindness, to be understood. Because those distinctions are so important. You cannot fully understand one without understanding the other. Then we have soul agreements where we will have someone leave us, we will have someone dump us, divorce us, abandon us, whether it be friends, intimate relationships, whether it be employees, whether it be employers, where they trigger so much emotion, so much subconscious processing that comes to your conscious mind. What they give you the opportunity to do is to have surface within you what you need to heal, what you need to unravel, and the subconscious processing that is limiting you. And this is what I get to see, is that my ex from many years ago, and the painful process I went through with him leaving me, or rather abandoning me, was he was completing his soul agreement with me to trigger all my emotions, because that was the biggest grief and painful process that I pushed through in healing and going to great depths of me to get to the other side of truly feeling trust in myself. Those soul agreements are to push us to places we cannot go on our own, but we need others to actually trigger and ignite in us. And so valuing and appreciating them and what they have gifted you, as much as you may not have liked it, as much as it may have been uncomfortable and painful, they helped you get to where you are. Then you have people who will come into your life that make a commitment to be with you over a longer period of time, to walk beside you, so that you get to know the process of acceptance, the process of belief in you, the process of guidance. And my friend Yili was someone who has done that. And she chose to be in my life and to be available to me, to support me for a long period of time. And I knew we'd made that soul agreement. And I am extremely appreciative that she committed to me because there is a part of me for many years that I didn't believe I deserved it. Then we have people come into our life to walk beside us so that we experience and get to know what friendship's like, to experience what loyalty's like, what trust is like, to have an experience of safety and security that we may not have had when we were younger, to experience what it's like to have that exchange and interaction that is extremely natural to us in soul form and human form. And these relationships contribute to support our healing, our growth, and our evolvement. I look at my friend Paul, who passed about this time last year. I was in his life when he lost his soulmate from pneumonia. I'd only known them a month and a half to 2 months, and she passed, and he really didn't have anyone in his life, but him and I became really great friends. And we walked beside each other through some pain during that time for a number of years, because all he wanted was to be with her. And he still had time in human form to walk this earth. We lost touch with each other for nearly 10, 15 years. And then he found me again. And we were in each other's lives again for 5 years. And he supported me, and he became a really good friend of Alan's during my time of the liquidation of my business and coming back to New Zealand. And the beautiful thing was I got to have a couple of years with him, and that friendship and remembering what it was like to be connected to someone who was so supportive and believed in me so powerfully. And yet again, I was there for him for this passing of his second partner. And isn't it interesting, our soul agreements can even have patterns. People can come into our lives because we deserve to have someone there or people there to support us, that believe in us, that are loyal to us, so that we have a reference point of that which reflects back who we are inside, for us to connect to that part of ourselves and believe in ourselves again. And that's part of the reason they're there, is to remind us who we were and who we are. Then we will have people who we have soul agreements with, who come into our lives to show you how loved, lovable and valued you are. And for you to experience that, so you can expand your connection to these qualities, you and the expression of them. And because you deserve to be loved, because you deserve to know you're lovable, and for you to share that love and to experience depths of interaction and relationship at a human level that we naturally experience at a soul level. And we make soul agreements to know what family is and isn't. Then we make soul agreements where we learn from the person, or where they prompt us with a message for us to actually go down a particular pathway, or to feel something inside, or to remember something. We make soul agreements where we receive feedback and insight into the aspects of us that we're not conscious of, and to see more of the dimension, the parts of ourselves, so that we know more of ourselves and so that we're more aware. And we make soul agreements where the other person will create opportunities and open doors for you that you deserve to experience for your progress on your journey in this human form. And then we have soul agreements where the other person provides you with what you deserve in physical form for your future, where they give you and share things for you for steps that you do not yet know about. And then we experience soul agreements where the person is there to value and appreciate you, so that you see it and hear it, and so that you grow your self-worth, and so that you know that you are worthy. But we also make soul agreements, like the one I had with that gentleman whose name I still do not know, but I know his soul, at the hardware store, where they will teach us something or give us information that will help us with something really practical. And while they're helping you with something practical, you may be giving them a gift through your agreement to them that is something more personal, that's something more spiritual, that may be a message. So don't underestimate also the two-way process. And since meeting that man, we have had a couple of other items that have needed repair. And we've been guided to exactly the right people who have been so generous in their time, their energy, and also the amount that they charge or not charged. Who gets a washing machine fixed, fully cleaned out? On the day that you drop it off, they have it done within 3 hours. And in that process, the conversations that happened with the person who fixed the actual washing machine went to depths about this gentleman's wife who had passed and his experience of that, let alone his dog that was there at the actual premises, who was his wife's dog. And you could see and feel that dog was missing that female connection, was missing that interaction. And I'm a huge animal lover, but I'm not as drawn to dogs as I am cats. And I took time with that dog to actually give it that love and attention and to be conscious of it. And being aware of all factors in our environment and our interactions and what you feel drawn to do. Like I was drawn to go to the dog. I was drawn to ask about the dog with this gentleman, which led to the conversation about his wife while we're waiting for the washing machine. We underestimate the power of that process and the exchanges going on and how important and relevant they are. In sharing my processing, I essentially want to encourage you to be able to increase your awareness of each person you have a relationship with and what your soul agreement is with each other and all the different dimensions and benefits you gain from that interaction and relationship, including the ones where people have left your life. I've recently had a friend leave my life, her choice. And it is that our soul agreement is completed on what we both were gifting and sharing with each other. And it may be that that person comes back into my life again, and I'm open to that. But what I reflect on is all the beautiful, amazing gifts that I gained from that process and interaction with her. For you to be aware of all interactions, whether it's in a shop, whether it's walking down the street and it's a look, whether it's a car that you pass. How many times have you been driving somewhere and you've got stuck behind someone that is slower and you can't pass them? And you get frustrated rather than being accepting of it. And so many times I've got to see that either there has been a mishap that's happened on the road a couple of minutes before I actually got there. So that car going slower actually was benefiting me because I missed the mishap. Or it meant that you were a little bit later to get to where you were going, which worked out absolutely appropriately because the other person you were meeting or whatever you were going to do had been delayed as well. And yet when we experience that, we get so stressed and caught up in our emotion and angry, and we're so non-accepting of it. Rather than going, hey, no point putting energy into this. It is what it is, in the sense that this is happening for a reason and I accept that. So enjoy it and see what unfolds. You know, things happen to keep you safe, to give you a smile, to help you be more aware, for you to explore and uncover and heal some aspect of you. So the more aware you are of the relationships you have, your interactions, the people you connect with, the people you even look at, the experiences you have, the journeys you go on, and the messages you get, the more conscious you are, the more powerful you will be in embracing, accepting, valuing, and completing your soul agreements and appreciating yourself, every person you come across, and every being that's been a part of your journey to get you to where you are. And for those that are listening to this, thank you for being a part of my journey. Thank you for our soul agreement, for us to be able to have an interaction even though I don't know who you are. And if you do want to drop a line and drop me an email, I'd love to know the people I have soul agreements with. Keep trusting all the processes that unfold, embrace the reasoning why, see the individuals and beings that are a part of that process, and for you, identify the soul agreement that you have with them or that they have with you. And maybe even take a step like I did and verbalize it to the person and have a chat with them about it. You'll get to know and see those that are receptive at this point in time, those that maybe not, and if they're not, maybe you mentioning it was exactly your soul agreement to help them go away, process it, and become more conscious of soul agreements. May you experience making such a beautiful difference around trusting the process more and being more conscious of your soul agreements.